Welcome to the December 8th, 2016 session of the Prescott Planning and Zoning Commission. So it looks like we have a quorum, so we'll go right into it. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I make the motion to approve. I'll second.
Okay, we have any discussion?
I forwarded my comments that I wasn't present at the last meeting. That's been
Okay. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Say aye. Aye. Hello.
Excuse me, phone votes.
All right, first item, site plan review, S116006, site plan for 20-unit multifamily apartment complex.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. As with both projects this morning, this is all part of that site plan process we started about a year ago as it ties in with the water allocation process. So the first one, as you said, SI 16006, for a 20-unit multifamily apartment complex located off of Apple Blossom Drive, which is access to Gail Gardner Way. You can note that this Gail Gardner Way, Apple Blossom, Walmart is off the page to the north here. And the unique portion of this site is kind of related to the title of the project, Boulder Hill. The only developable portion of this site that's relatively flat is right here in the front. The rest of the project is very steep boulders, which is why the project is only proposing 20 units instead of the 112 that by density right, they could get if it was a fully flat parcel. So the project is to have get that up on the screen here, two main buildings accessing off the Apple Blossom Drive. One building here, a long linear building straight here, and then the other smaller building. And the unique nature of the, I call it the snail shell, is for the parking. It was the only way to design the parking so that it would work, so that they get the required amount of parking in there with the one-way drive aisle width. They do meet the parking requirements for the bedroom count. They do meet the site plan approval for staff review for public works and planning and zoning. And it's kind of a unique shape and unique feature when you look at it from above, but that is the only way it would work, and it fits, it meets the zoning code. So with that, I know the applicant is present in the audience, and if you have any questions, I'm certainly available for you.
How far did staff go with the applicant into the access? The access seems a little awkward.
It's not.
I mean, I look at the project, I said, okay,
Right.
you know, sure, it looks like they did what they had to do to get it on that site, but well, I'm not so sure about
They
the
have,
access.
the surveyor and the engineer involved with the project was able to get just enough width at the entrance between Rock Lane, this little space right here but on Rock Lane off of Apple Blossom, to meet the requirements for access. It does meet the code, it does meet access requirements, and it is recorded that way. And it just barely makes it. You're right. It is tight, but it's there.
It sure be nice, a lot nicer if they had access off of Gil Gardner.
It would be. It'd be direct access off of Gail Gardner, but there's no way to get to it from there.
So the traffic is looked at, engineer is looked at, I guess 20 units isn't going to generate a huge amount of traffic. But
There were no negative comments from Public Works on the traffic when doing the initial staff review. It was all approved by them.
okay. All right, commissioners, questions? No?
How many bedrooms? Frank?
The bedroom count, apartment types will consist of 14 two-bedroom and 6 three-bedroom units.
Okay. All right.
Frank, what's the requirement for parking for a three-bedroom apartment?
It's 1 space per bedroom plus 1/2 space per unit for guest parking, up to a maximum of 20 guest parking spaces.
So 3.5 is the number,
Yes,
roughly?
up to a maximum of 20. So if, in this case, if they had 30 apartments, they would, or more than that, they would only need to go to a maximum of 20 guest parking spaces. You don't have to go to 25 guests or 30 guests if you had like a 200-unit complex. It's only up to a 20 is the max.
So our assumption is a parking space for each bedroom.
Yes.
Is that a fair ruling?
It seems to work.
Because that assumes 3 adults.
Yes.
Thanks.
A little more parking than they required on your apartments, wasn't it? That's good. Have more parking, okay.
Buy more land.
Okay, is the owner, developer, or a spokesman here who would like to comment on the project?
Two-fisted, Mike.
Whoa.
It's getting better, honest.
It
Good morning,
is.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Michael Haywood. My offices are at 212 South Marina Street. We've spent a lot of time working with this. Actually, this is the result of months and months and months. We started into this last year sometime. And looking at multiple options, ways for the access, the ingress, egress. Mr. Mecca, the fire department was initially engaged before we did anything. I told the developer immediately, said, you got to be able to make the fire department happy or you will not have a project. And as evidenced, here we are. Essentially, it is the desire to leave the balance of the property undeveloped at this time. Who knows, in 2020, is there more option down the road? But this is what the developer has in mind right now, and we see this as we're going to enhance some of the water systems in the area, which will bump up water supply for the adjoiners. Fire flow. So all in all, yeah, we've spent a lot of time working on this. The architect has spent a lot of time working on it. The engineer, and I'm just here for the coffee and the donuts. So, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What's with the underground storage, water retention? What is that?
Anymore you have site development requirements that make us retain the difference between the pre and post development. Historically, water just ran down the street, ran into the creek, took off, but now we have to meter the outflow so that it's consistent with historic rainfall dump to the drainage systems.
So you use pervious paving or on the parking there?
I can't read the notes, but they're coming up with all kinds of, more and more product that are chambers that are buried in leach rock and things like that. That in essence, it's saying if there was three cubic feet pre-development, now there's 4 cubic feet. We store the difference and meter out 3 cubic feet until the balance of it catches up. A lot of the surface ponds that you see, the requirement was that they either percolate or be empty within a 24, I believe, or 48-hour period to prevent mosquito breeding.
Right.
Underground here, we don't have to worry about mosquito breeding, things like that. So it does enhance. We don't have to utilize surface area for ponds to store water that can be stored underground and metered out.
So these are like chambers? What are
Yeah.
they, concrete, or what are they?
Mr. Carnes could fill you in. I believe that they are some polymer type thing and sort of like an egg shape. And they have some that you fill with actual, with leach rock. These bigger chambers that are bedded with leach rock and structurally sound to support, the surface above it, store an amazing amount of water for the calculations and the difference of the pre and post for whatever storm event the city requires the design.
Kind of like
Mr. Dubroy looks at these things with diligence. Anyway.
some of the, kind of like some of the new alternate septic systems
Yeah.
using polymer
Yeah.
chambers,
yeah.
right? Connecting them together as many as they need.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's some pretty neat
It's a
stuff
great
on
use because otherwise these, what do you got, 100 feet of parking there? 20 feet? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of land you'd have reserved just to have percolate.
Of course, it's the low end of the site, right?
Yeah.
I assume.
And you can utilize that land. They're doing a lot of that in Phoenix, and I think it's a great,
Yeah.
it's a great use of those things.
You make these big ponds, and all of a sudden you have an attractive nuisance when they're full of water, and
Yeah.
little Bobby's going to get his puppy, and, you know, yeah.
And more than that, it's just land that's got to sit there. It can't be
Exactly.
utilized for the project. So I
If you
think it's a
could grow
great
a
thing.
pot in the bottom of it, maybe, you know, but other than that, no, it's useless.
You
Never
would
mind,
think of
pardon
that.
me.
You would think of that. What? You woke Kenny up.
I know where you.
Is the,
Not me, man, not me.
Did you say the engineers here?
Yes.
So, good, okay. I'd like to talk about the access road some more.
Oh, okay, as in the viability or the
Yeah,
legality? or
just
the-
is this the only
That's
way
it. Yeah, we
it's gonna work?
investigated looking at it, buying, purchasing, adjoining properties to
Like off
provide
of Gale
alternate
Gardner,
access.
right?
All of a sudden, a $100,000 trailer was worth $350,000. You know, it's amazing how that, Mr. Maverick has experienced that historically. So we went to the adjoiner to the south, we secured enough right-of-way coming off of that rock lane. And again, you know, that I told the developer, if Mr. Mecca doesn't like this, it don't go. So he has reviewed the radius for the snail, as Mr. Hall references. The snail radius meets fire department
Right.
requirements for any turning motions, for ingress, egress, for dual access, if you will, so the panicking people can get out while the fire department's coming in. So that has been reviewed and is at its optimum condition, given the
I think I would be more worried about the turning radius right at the entrance for a fire truck, but not the snail. And I guess it's okay.
They're
huh?
comfy.
It's okay, all right. And there's been no adverse comments from the people at properties adjacent to that access
Not to
coming
my
in?
knowledge, not to us.
No, sir. No, I had one phone call from somebody. I don't think they were adjacent. I think they were in the vicinity within a block or two of the site.
Okay,
And they were curious when they were going to be built so somebody and their family could have an apartment near near the parents lived.
I see.
That was the comment I received.
Okay.
We see it too as utilization of, you know, increasing the density in one area. All of a sudden, the service to that, a garbage truck is picking up 20 units instead of driving to 20 individual lots, you know, just
Oh, sure.
little by little as you guys are headed towards and, you know, enhancing downtown density, et cetera. You know, you reduce your overall cost and exposure as far as infrastructure and service, and people live happily ever after in God's country. It's good stuff.
Okay. Any other questions, commissioners? What's the action today?
Today is a
Thank
motion
you.
at the bottom of your staff report is to recommend approval of the site plan to the city council.
Okay. Is there any reason to delay? Anybody? No? I'll entertain a motion. I'll close. Anybody else in the audience like to speak to this? Excuse me. No? I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, comments, questions?
Well, I'd just like to say I'm pretty impressed with the design and the creative way they can sandwich these in there. And the drainage is impressive, so I think it's a good design.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. Move to approve SI 16-006 site plan for a 20-unit multifamily apartment complex, zoning multifamily medium, APN 115-08065B, property owner Kevin Randall.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? No? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Say aye. Aye. Thank you. Okay. All right, onward. Item number 3 on the agenda, site plan review 16-007, site plan for 72-unit workforce housing apartment complex.
Yes, sir. Again, this is a very similar process for a site plan that's tied with the water allocation to go to city council. Creekview Peachtree Village Apartments, which is a 72 or 70 unit, the numbers fluctuate, but 72 unit apartment complex on Miller Valley Road, just for orientation for the public. We're talking about McDonald's right here, the new Prescott Diner, CVS, Oil Can Henry's is right here, I believe. So that's where, that's the project we're talking about with these two parcels. This project is a little bit different than the previous one, and that is a larger number of apartments. The apartments will be in 6 separate buildings located near the front of the site near Miller Valley Road. The entrance to Miller Valley Road, this small PDF is actually an older one. The PDF, the site plan you have on your table there shows the entrance located much further away from the McDonald's entrance for safety reasons, and the clubhouse is located now where the entrance used to be on this earlier site plan. The 6 units have about 12 apartments in each one of them. The buildings are located forward to be out of the floodplain. The floodplain and floodway for Miller Creek, which is back in the back of the property. The developer wants to stay out of that, which is a good idea. So they moved their project forward out of the floodplain and floodway. The project went to the Water Issues Committee this past Tuesday, and they received a favorable recommendation for 5.5 acre feet for this year, for 2016, so that they could fund water for one of the units, one of the buildings, one of the 10-unit buildings. That way, in 2017, they can continue to ask for additional water allocation. And again, the developer is here in the audience if you have any questions. This will be a workforce housing project, and they can address with the tax financing and the workforce housing standard. They're here to address that as well. And Mr. Mabreck, for your question earlier on the parking, the difference between parking for market rate apartments and workforce housing apartments is the 3-bedroom portion. For the workforce housing apartments, the 3-bedroom units only need 2 parking spaces, not 3. And they're meeting that requirement here. So that is a difference.
Thank you.
And why does it need a zoning change?
Right now, it's zoned industrial light,
Right.
which we don't allow residential uses in our industrial zoning districts.
I see.
So this will be coming back to you on December 29th for both a rezoning from industrial light to business regional and an amendment to the general plan from industrial to commercial. You'll see this on the 29th.
And why is business regional selected as opposed to a residential zone?
Partly because here's the existing zoning, and again, you'll see this on the 29th, but the current zoning is industrial light, and if you notice around it, everything is business regional except for the Dexter neighborhood on the other side of the creek. So to be contiguous with existing zoning, the business regional zoning classification was selected. We could have used business general, business regional, multifamily medium, any category. One of the benefits of using business regional is that for whatever reason, and I'm not anticipating this, but for any reason, should this project not be successful, business regional would allow the current owners to have more flexibility in future development, where if we just did it as multifamily medium, they would be limited to only multifamily type residential uses.
I understand. I'm a fan of continuity, so that seems like a reasonable way to go. Ken, you had a question?
2. And I'm glad Mr. Mattingly is here, because one of my questions will have to do with access to the site there. But and I'm not that concerned with it. I just want to hear what Ian has to say. Could you explain for the public, Frank, this process that we're going through, which is pretty unique, approving a site plan before a zoning change?
Yes.
Could you give it a little more in-depth? I think some of the people here know, but maybe others at home don't know. This is a brand new thing you're doing here.
And I would like to back up a little bit. I pulled the wrong site plan earlier, as I noted. This is the correct one. I just grabbed the wrong one out of the file. So as you can see, here's the entrance that Ian can address for us. Here's the new location of the clubhouse. This is the McDonald's entrance. And of course, the building 1. So apologize for that. Just had a 50-50 shot of grabbing the right site plan, and I grabbed the wrong one. The reason we're looking at this project prior to the zoning being in place for it is tied to the water allocation process for 2016. The 2016 water policy had so much water that they can ask for as the year comes to a conclusion. There's not enough water left for water allocation left for the project to receive full water allocation. The draft 2017 water policy that has not been adopted yet by City Council, but the initial draft of the 2017 water policy, when this project was being reviewed by staff, had a comment in comment number 14, policy number 14, which stated that no new apartments could ask for water allocation in 2017 unless they had a water allocation contract in 2016. So because of that statement, even though it's in draft, the idea was to help the applicant get to the point to where they could get at least a partial contract for their water allocation in 2016 so they could request the balance in 2017. Now, with that being said, that sounds complicated. The public hearing process for a rezoning and a general plan amendment requires us to advertise and notice people well in advance of the public hearing. The timeline for advertising for the public hearing for the rezoning did not coincide with the adoption of the 2017 water policy and the fact that we're quickly running out of time in 2016 before January 1st. So that's why the idea was to have a site plan approval tied to the water allocation for at least some of the water so that they could end up with a contract in 2016 in case that water policy number 14 sticks around in 2017 that says no new apartments.
Thank you. And maybe a little later, Mr. Lamerson, who's I know very familiar with the water issues, could further explain that. My fear, and I like this project, but my fear is with this kind of policy, we may end up with starting and stopping some projects. If these guys are allocated for one building and a clubhouse.
Yes, they aren't allocated yet. They received a favorable recommendation from the Water Issues Subcommittee of 5.5 acre-feet this past Tuesday.
But they could, if that all goes through, that they could start this with a building and the rest of it.
They will have to request further allocation in 2017, which would need a recommendation and approval from City Council.
But they could start their project?
Yes.
So that's what I'm referring to. We could end up with some partially completed projects if we're not real careful.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a bigger story there. It's like one hand doesn't know what the other one's doing. It's taken 6 or 8 years before we've finally got apartments ramped up and going again, and we're starting to see them because we need them in the city, and all of a sudden in 2017 they might have to grind to a halt.
Well, not if this project gets its water allocation in 2016. That's why we were motivated to get at least some of the water under contract if that policy 14 stays with the full council vote.
Well, I'm just hoping they look at the larger picture because, you know, like I said, it's taken years to get these apartments going again.
We've had projects. We've had a project, not because of this type of thing, but we've had projects that were partially completed. I think the one down here at the end of Cortez Street is the first one that comes to my mind. We've had some older apartments there that have been there for years, and then they started putting some infrastructure in for some more units, and that got stopped. So I just would hate to see that happen around town. I think it's a great project, and I think we have a need for apartments, and certainly this kind of apartment. In this particular location, I'm quite familiar with this parcel and have been for a great number of years, and it's one of those parcels that I think the owners probably years ago wished they had taken some offers and developed it. And because that can oftentimes happen in older neighborhoods where the parcel becomes antiquated and nobody knows what to do with it. This is a great use for this particular location. But I just in general, not for this project, but in general for the city, I'd like to hear how we can not approve partial projects. Other than that, I'm fine with this.
Commissioners have any technical questions from
Mr.
technical
Chairman,
people who are here?
I'm sorry, Leslie Grazer with Water Department would like to address the question.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Leslie Grazer. I'm the Water Resource Manager for the City of Prescott and work with our Water Issues Committee regarding these type of projects. As you know, this all goes hand in hand as we work together. So to answer, one of the things that I heard you had concern about was a start and stop related to if only 5.5 acre feet was issued out, would they start building and then be in a halt position? And if you recall the Prescott Lakes Villas project that came through, they are also doing the exact same thing where a partial amount of water was available. And that project is looking to come in 2017, capture the rest of it, because they're not going to do a partial build or start moving earth with a partial water allocation. However, we do have policies and we do have limited supplies that are made available each year per contract. So I think that would be the first, to answer that first question. Now, the second question that you had mentioned about we have apartments moving, why sudden halt? So we looked at our contracts for the last 3 years, and on the books, ready to go in contract is over 1,000 units of apartments. So there has been a good move on that. I will say it's slightly shy of 1,000. It was like 940. So in the last 3 years, the contracts reflect that we have water tied up, ready to go for apartments. Of course, they do have performance criteria. If they don't build within their performance criteria time frame, usually 2-3 years, then that water comes back into the portfolio, making it available for somebody else.
How long of a period?
It really depends on the project sometimes. Some projects need 3 years, some are more like 2. In apartment complex situation, we'd probably say a performance of, it depends. Some apartments are, this is a smaller one, this was probably a 2-year. We could work in a 3-year. The Prescott Lakes Villas, I believe we put in a 3-year performance criteria because there are over 100 apartments. You're starting to push into a bigger category. So I hope that helps explain what we have going on. Of course, there's many different committees or councils that are working, and there's many different facets of the city that have to, the gears have to mesh and turn, and we do the best we can with everybody having different meetings at different times.
Thank you, Leslie.
I hope that helps address your question.
That helped me with my question. But I know this has nothing to do with today's agenda, but I think we've got a tail wagging the dog here. It's really tough if we take all the city people, government people out of the project, it's really tough to figure out how to buy a piece of land, put infrastructure in, get going, get financing. All of it has to come together, and it's really very difficult to do partial projects. So I think what's going to happen, certainly on projects of this size and larger, is that they're going to wait until they get all the water allocation, which means they've got their claim for some water, and other people who may have other projects aren't going to have the water use, and this project may end up not getting built because of all the nuances of development, and that is especially lending, the financing of these projects. So I think it's easy to sit here and talk about water and allocations and percentages and how many units and all the stuff you have to do, but I think from the practical side, we may not end up with a community that's getting what we are hoping to get. I'd like to see us figure out some other way of doing that if we can, but that's my personal comment.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Sir. And if I may, the water portfolio is substantial. We have so many subdivisions covered at this time, but it is true that the city purchased through the community, for the community, a certain amount of water supplies. Projects such as this and others are absolutely available to go out and get their own water supplies through extinguished grandfathered rights. So people are using a supply that the city and the community have purchased, and it's a big investment. So here again, they can work with the city and the supplies that we have and the planning that's been done, not just by myself, but my predecessors. And if they want to go build and have it all in one shot, they can invest in their own water supplies and purchasing those from the irrigation grandfathered rights. So it's just a matter of, we've made as many opportunities as we can for development in the city. And this also goes back to state laws. So, even though we have...
Therein lies the problem. I
certain
agree
things.
with you.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ken, I think you and I saying the same thing, I mean, it's...
Tough plan.
Yeah, I understand that. But also, the water situation is very, very complicated. But I can understand how it's kind of, it can put the brakes on some projects possibly that, and maybe that's what it should do. I mean, we don't want to overdraw the water, which is always going to be a problem in the future. On the other hand, I believe in growth. I think you don't grow, you die. That's my feeling, anyway. So, and we need apartments in this town. So.
In this area.
Yeah. Okay, commissioners, anything else? Yes, Mr. Lamerson.
Number one, I wouldn't consider it a problem. I'd say it's the circumstance, and the circumstance is what we're dealing with.
Right.
All right, we have a limited supply that we've been allocated through Water Department, Water Resources of the state of Arizona. Here's how much we have to allocate, and by policy, we don't allow any one applicant to consume all the water. The best we've come up with is no more than 50%. That's been a standard. And as the 50% keep diminishing, remembering that we're on alternative water supply until such time as we get water from somewhere else, you can only deal with what you have. Now, as Leslie was pointing out, there are other available water credits out there to be purchased by a private property owner, and nobody's saying if your land is developable by this standard. But I think it's a terrible shame to preclude somebody from even getting started on a project if they're willing to get started on the project on the gamble that maybe next year I'll be the first in the door or second in the door and there'll be more water for me to continue my project by saying we don't have the water for the whole project. That's up to them and their financiers. This was one of those things that we discussed at quite some length during the water issues, sharing it with you, not that water issues configures land use issues. What we do is we talk about water. One of the things that we discussed was, is it righteous to put in policy suggesting to the council body as a whole the word shall versus the word may? One's a mandate and one's an option. And that took quite some time. And finally, the hammered out issue was, I think it was number 14, it may be number 15, I can't remember. But the word is may rather than shall, because the word shall is pretty stringent when it comes to telling somebody what you can and can't do with your property. If the water's available and the project meets the criteria of the general plan, there's no public safety or health issue. It's very difficult as an elected official to tell somebody your private property rights don't really matter. So I would rather be a little more flexible than a little more rigid, and that's how that all came about. So in this particular case, if the private property owner is willing to accept what water we have available for distribution today, understanding that the water may not be there January 1st for the second part, maybe, may not be, we don't know yet. But as we get there, the applications we've dealt with, first come, first service, that come down the pike.
Very good. We haven't had this discussion before. This is good.
All right, well, normally P&Z tries to stick to land use,
right?
Not necessarily water, but since in this particular case, situation, as Ms. Glazer tried to point out, as we move forward with the implementation of the general plan, subject again to a new strategic plan, everything's coming together more like a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle where you're having to deal with certain things that maybe in the past should have been dealt with but weren't. And it's very difficult to just like, you're going to see some things coming from the downtown area. Well, the general plan was pretty specific about wanting more residential units in the downtown. Well, if you think about what you said, Commissioner Menser, the location, the demographic changes with who's moving into the Prescott area, and the desire for apartment living rather than single family, the proximity to the hospital, the shopping, the various different things, certain pieces of property that are available in the marketplace, and the market will dictate, you know, regardless of how the zoning's designed. That's why we have the opportunity for rezoning. If it makes sense to rezone it, depending on what the market is, depending on what the desire is, and then you look at the public health and safety issues and the availability of this or this issue, and you make a rational decision. So, okay.
Great.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
I would comment still that the risk in this, and understanding exactly what you were saying, Mr. Lamerson, the risk is partially completed projects. And I think in the long run, that can have an impact on how do we plan our city. So I appreciate that a developer can make the decision to move forward or not, but we may end up having partially completed projects. I think this is the second or third one we've had that's going to be developed in phases. Wasn't one on Willow Creek Road or Willow Lake Road?
Second one, Willow Lake. The
So
one
I just,
off
you know,
the-
I think when we're doing those policies, we ought to consider some of those other effects from the private side. And that's all my concern is, if we can get a project. It's tough to look at a site plan and approve it if you're not sure it's only a piece of it's going to get built. So that's all I'm saying here, and I'd like us to maybe consider that somehow. I don't know how. I hate water issues, and I'm just grateful that you're sitting there trying to remember if it's policy 14 or 15. I'm shocked that we have 15 policies, but apparently we do.
George?
Yeah, well, just to go along with what Ken says, this is not unique to apartments. We've done this many times in planned area developments where we have unit numbers and they have performance criteria and they come back and get more water and so on and so forth. So this is the way and it is, and the market drives the sale of homes and the additional units to move forward, and so all that. And it's difficult to forecast what the market's going to do, but I think we know that there's a demand for apartments.
Sure.
We do know that, so that's pretty good. So that's all.
Terry?
My question is not water, it's access from one way in, one way out. Was there a traffic impact study required?
For the traffic question, we do have our traffic engineer here, Ian Mattingly. And the one way in, one way out is adequate for a fire department. That usually the second entrance is sometimes a requirement for the fire department to have. But in this particular case, because it's only 72 units, the one access is okay for emergency services. But for the engineering part, I'll bring up Ian.
Ian, you're on.
Good morning. Ian Mattingly, City Traffic Engineer. Yeah, it did not require a TIA. Initially, we had made a comment I think when it came into the pre-application conference because of the size, but it didn't generate it based on the Land Development Code, strict requirements on peak hour trips. It only generates, I think, in the maximum peak hour about 44 cars coming in or out. I think it was in the PM. And so we did, though, work with the developer and the engineer in moving the location. As Frank showed you, the old map showed that they had laid out the site with the driveway kind of stacked right on top of the McDonald's one. And so that was one of the main comments for the TIA comment initially, was just so that we could look at the site access. But if you notice, you know, it's a big site, but there's really not a lot of frontage because of the triangular portion there where that parking lot extension is, and there's been some coffee houses and things to the south. So they really didn't have a lot of frontage, but we were just looking to optimize the spacing between McDonald's and them, mainly for the lefts in. You know, there's a turn pocket out there, a continuous turn pocket, and we really didn't want, if you've been to any of those drive-throughs, there's like 3 of them stacked up. You have a lot of driveways really close, and so there's like cars going in and out. And we were just trying to avoid that, and they easily accommodated that and optimized it right to the center. Because actually, if you go up towards the triangular portion, there's a driveway about where the Y is in Miller Valley Road, and so they basically split the distance. And there's a driveway. I think it's about right there. There's a driveway pretty close on the south side. So they just basically optimized the spacing between the driveway to the north and the south, because we don't know what will happen with that parcel down there. And so There's a turn pocket in place. They've got the spacing optimized. I thought they really went out of their way to move the clubhouse and do some things to make that happen. And honestly, to put in another driveway along that short of a frontage wouldn't really serve any good purpose for the amount of traffic they're having. So I think it's a good site, and as long as fire is good with a single access in and out, and I think they have requirements for other things that handle that. Traffic looks good.
And they don't want to take away from the parking in the Mexican restaurant. It's already it's already overstressed.
Pretty popular.
Yeah, I end up at CVS when I go to the Mexican restaurant. Ooh, no, don't admit that.
I guess my concern is that when the light is green at the post office, the traffic comes around that and it zooms. Really fast through, making this access to the apartment.
It's quite a ways away.
Yeah, the good thing is because we're on a straight alignment, this distance from where the driveway is going to be down, down here, you have more than enough sight distance for not just the posted speed, but what they're actually driving out there. So I'm not saying that there's going to be no decisions to be made by drivers. There is, but the fact that we have the turn pocket there allows storage outside the lanes. If you're pulling out and going southbound, you can store in that turn pocket. And since it's only, accessing the apartments, most of the movements are north, so you're going to turn right, but you're left. It was really getting the left turn movements away from that McDonald's. We just want enough space where a car coming southbound can get in this left turn pocket without any interaction with the stuff at the drive-throughs. And that's been accomplished here. I mean, they have, I think it's something like 110 feet. Typically a turn pocket, even on a street like this, we'd have 60 foot of storage as our minimum. So they're storing at least 2 more cars. And given the amount of cars coming in, 44 peak, let's just split them 50-50, and then you have in and out. That's more than enough to handle a small 15-minute peak or 5-minute peak. So, nothing's ideal, but certainly they've done all they can at this location.
No, I think it's great that they moved it, because when I was doing my homework on this thing, my first comment was, a driveway right next to McDonald's? Come on, give me a break. So I'm really happy that they made that adjustment, because that was really the only problem I had with the project, to tell you the truth. Okay, hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
A couple questions, Mr. Planner.
Yes, sir.
You guys have any questions of traffic?
Well, I'm not too concerned with the traffic. But, I've attended a number of the Water Issues Committee meetings, trying to have a better understanding of all the moving parts here on our water portfolio, and it's pretty complicated to understand that. But from my understanding, I think these partially begun projects in one allocated year does give them priority for allocation the following year. Is that correct? So if they're started in 2016, they have a priority to finish their allocation as long as they don't exceed that 50% restriction in the following year?
I don't think necessarily they have priority, but they are further along in the process. So we allocate when everybody has their pieces together. So if we step back again and look at Prescott Lakes Villas, they're not going to be starting from a beginning standpoint. This project might be standing a little bit differently because you have a rezone and general plan amendment to work through. But it doesn't give them necessarily priority. But they are in progress, and if they have their pieces come together, then they'll be moved along. So we don't sit around and hold a lot of water waiting, saying, well, you got your foot in the door first, that kind of thing. So they have to have it has to be a real project. They have all their pieces. Let's go ahead and allocate out the rest. So
Well, it seems to me that if there was a priority, then these projects could move along. Without that, another developer could come in and grab a significant amount of the allocated resources for the following year and stop a project like this from getting completed.
only 50%, and once again, it's subject to a council committee recommendation. So we track the water monthly, monthly meetings, things of that nature. So
You have
I guess
100 acre feet per year for residential?
The proposed policy that will not be seen by the council until the 13th next week, that's proposing 70 acre feet at this time to
For residential?
and 100 for commercial.
Oh, okay. So that's, what, 280 potential apartment units?
Or something else. So
Or higher,
it's
or something
solely
different.
That's not
solely
a lot
residential.
of units.
But I still think that the problem we're facing here is we're looking at some real estate, we're looking at planning our community and how do we plan it, and what we're doing it on the basis of is a policy. And I think we have to do what we have to do, and I understand that, but I still think the tail's wagging the dog when we start talking about long-term investments, our community, and basing it on policies. Because the policy can change tomorrow. We can get a new mayor, we can get new council, policies can change. We can get the state of Arizona starting to peck their nose into our business again. So my only concern is that we try our best to not allow projects to have a great potential of being a partial project. And I don't know how you do it with government. Government is going to, most government people are going to try and follow a policy. I get it. But real estate doesn't follow a policy. I see Gary Kelly sitting back here on the project. It's tough for him to work with a developer who says, let's do this, let's draw the whole thing out, and let's build a driveway and a clubhouse and 6 units. It makes it difficult for everybody. So all I'm cautioning, I'm using this platform to editorialize to the mayor and council that let's figure out some way to not have this potential danger happen. My point. And I'm done.
Unfortunately, you know, the water situation's reality. That's the problem.
And Mr. Chairman,
That's just not gonna
it's
change.
just one part of the complex thing that you've described that a developer has to go through in order to move a project forward. The city granting a water allocation for one of these multiple buildings on the site will not get the developer his project moving. I don't think you have to worry about someone coming in and permitting building one and then stopping. They're not going to get financing for building one. They're going to get financing for the whole project. But given our current water policy and the council's conservative approach to a very valuable resource, letting them get a water allocation for one building's worth of units gives them the opportunity to then be in line immediately in 17 for the rest of the water. He's not going to pursue the project unless he gets the rest
So
of the water.
it is a priority.
But that's
It is a priority then, no matter what you call it.
It grants an opportunity he wouldn't have otherwise.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you, everyone.
On that though, I mean, Leslie pointed out that they can still go and purchase grandfathered irrigation rights. Is that true? So the project can continue if the city does not allocate the water.
Okay, that's good to know. Actually, it's very educational for me. I mean, because we haven't really discussed it because we don't usually get into water. So it's interesting. I'm learning things today, which is good. Any other questions, commissioners? Technical questions, water, traffic? No? I've got a couple questions. How does this plan work? How does it relate to the general plan?
We will be bringing back a rezoning and a general plan amendment to you at your meeting on December 29th, just a few weeks away. That meeting, right now, the general plan and the zoning coordinate. The general plan has it listed as industrial land use, and the zoning currently is industrial. So in December 29th, we'll be bringing you a rezoning to business regional with a general plan amendment to commercial from industrial. So it doesn't right now, but we're asking you to we approve the site plan based on that, contingent upon that approval. And we'll be with you again on the 29th for both the rezoning and the business.
Sounds to me like that should have been done in a general plan. Shown
We would have
as business general on general plan already.
Well, right, and like I explained earlier, it was the timeline. It was the timeline that we had to get a water service contract in 2016.
It's the water policy that's causing this.
All right. Like I say, I'm learning. The other question I have. One more question. These units are all sprinklered.
Yes, sir.
And so the fire department's satisfied with this cul-de-sac loop?
They're satisfied with it
Layout.
for two reasons. They're going to be sprinklered, and if you notice that the drive aisle width is 26 feet, that was done, that was a request for the requirement by the fire department for their ladder truck.
Okay.
So instead of the normal 24-foot aisle width, the developers have mapped out 26 feet
Okay.
per the
Sounds
fire
good.
department's request.
Anybody else in the audience like to speak? No? No, can we act on this today?
Yes, sir, we're asking
Did you
you
wanna-
to make a recommendation today.
Is the owner here?
The developer is, yes.
Developer? You'd like to make a few comments, my friend?
I sure would. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Mark Schumacher, Bethel Development. We actually built another project here in town, Canyon Run Village, down on White Spar Road back in 2002, 1, some time ago. So we're pretty familiar with Prescott. I have to admit that I've learned, as you have, about water in the last month. I can't thank staff enough for bending over backwards to help us get this project to where we are today. And they're doing it not because they believe the tail should wag the dog, but it's because of our timing issues. We have a deadline, we have an application to make to the State of Arizona Department of Housing. It's a time-certain application process, and we need certain things. Zoning is one of them, obviously general plan amendment, and water is one of them. The reason that we're getting a partial allocation of water this year is simply to preserve our right to get the balance next year. We will not build one building. We're not going to do a partial project. If we don't have it all, we can't do it. The financing doesn't work that way. We think this is an important project to the city of Prescott. It brings workforce housing, affordable housing. There's been a lot of new apartments built here, but not all of them are affordable. And we think this is going to provide a key asset to a large segment of the population here. And we look forward to being new neighbors.
Can you go into the workforce housing part of it a little deeper? What are we talking about? I mean, is it reduction? Is it a reduction of rents compared to normal?
Let me tell you what it isn't. This is not a subsidized housing project.
Okay.
Okay, let's put that on the table. We make an application to the state of Arizona, and we get, if we're lucky, if we're good and lucky, we get tax credits. The tax credits is the engine that drives the train. It'll provide 80 to 90% of the financing for the development. We'll have a very small first mortgage. Because of the tax credits, they come with baggage. Part of that baggage is that we agree to reduce the rents on the apartments to a level that's affordable to people who make 60% or below of median income. I don't want to get into the technicalities. I've been doing this 30 years and it's still confusing me. But the rents on these apartments, I looked at it this morning, there will be, I think, 3 or 4 apartments that may get over $700. The balance of them are going to be between $450 and $650, with the majority of them around the $500 range. That's an affordable rent. Now, they'll have to pay their utilities. They'll have to pay their car payment. They'll have to pay their life insurance. They'll have to buy their groceries. They have to do everything else. You know, it's not free stuff, but it's a good, high-quality apartment at a reduced rate. And it's all because of the tax credits. And the tax credits are what drive the deadline, which why we came in and pleaded with staff to help us, and they did, and we thank them. Does that explain?
Good. It's good for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody have questions? No?
How does the state, with their involvement in it, how do they look at, what kind of time period do they give you if you do have a partial allocation of water? Will they pull your...
We won't get funded.
You won't get funded with a partial?
No, we have to show evidence that we have the ability to have water to serve the project when we make our application.
So your application won't go in until you have full water allocation?
Next year, yeah.
If you get that next year?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay. Thanks a lot. All right. I don't know if I have to close something that isn't a public hearing, but I'm going to close it anyway. And I'll entertain a motion.
You're laughing, you gotta make the motion.
Okay. Somebody make the motion. Somebody make the motion.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve agenda item SI 16007 as proposed.
And I will
And-
second
The recommended motion has all the conditions for the general plan land use and the zoning change, so probably.
Ought to complete that?
Yeah.
Okay, move to recommend approval of site plan SI 16007 for a 70-unit workforce housing apartment complex contingent upon the site being rezoned to business regional, including an amendment to the 2015 general plan land use designation from industrial to commercial.
it. And I'll second that.
Why aren't we dealing with the amendment and the change, and the zoning change today?
Because when I answered that earlier, it was because we're required for public hearings
Public
for a
notice.
lead time for advertising. The
Okay.
timeline just didn't work.
Okay, I got you.
I tried.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Say aye.
Aye.
We're good? Okay. Anything else? Summary of current events?
The only thing we want to talk about, mentioned, was the sign code amendment passed and is in force today. It's for the new sign regulations that George brought before you earlier this year.
Right.
And I don't believe there was anything else.
I have something.
Oh, Darla has something.
I have something.
Darla?
I just wanted to share the email that I sent out for our holiday party on the 23rd. So just extended that invite.
I'll be there.
And I want to thank the commission also. I know that December 29th, our next meeting, is an awkward time between Christmas and New Year, and you have all agreed to make yourself available on that day for this project, for this rezoning and general plan amendment, and I thank you for that.
Okay. I was iffy on that. I may be available to depend on family things, so. All right, anything else? Nothing else? We're adjourned.
Hey, Tom, this,
What a dumb thing.